We are live. Welcome to the NBA.com vlog table on this, the 14th of December. Let us introduce you to our panelists here. That's Fran Blindberry from Houston. He covers the Southwest and all of the NBA for NBA.com. Jeff Kaplan from Dallas. John Schumans up in New Jersey. We got Scott Howard Cooper in Sacramento, California. And there's Sekou Smith, the proprietor of the NBA.com's Hang Time blog. He's here in Atlanta. Guys, lots to talk about. We're a quarter ways through the season. I want to bring up the biggest story, and you all knew it was coming. Scott, I want to go to you first and tell me about the Lakers and Mike D'Antoni and what's wrong and can they right it?
Well, they certainly can right it. There's obviously a lot of problems going on here, but it's still basically one quarter of the way through the season. They have Dwight Howard at a little less than 100%, although he's pretty far along. Steve Nash is obviously out. Steve Blake is out as well, which I don't think gets nearly the attention because the Lakers had depth problems to begin the season, and now to lose both point guards is obviously a blow. But I don't think that this is a Mike D'Antoni issue. I think this is a player focus issue. There's no way that they should be losing to the Cleveland Cavaliers. There's no way that they should be getting crushed like that in the first half against the New York Knicks. This is the same focus we saw from the Lakers in the playoffs under Mike Brown, the same focus we saw from the Lakers in the playoffs under Phil Jackson. So while the point can certainly be made that it was not a good fit for this roster, what's going wrong now is not about coaching, it's about the players.
Sekou, you buy that?
No, I don't buy it. I didn't think Mike D'Antoni was the best choice for that job in the first place. It has nothing to do with his coaching abilities or, what he brings to the table. But I thought they needed a coach who was more of a people manager than a game manager or a, massager of minutes and that sort of thing. You need somebody to manage a locker room with a lot of egos and a lot of new faces, big time players. Mike D'Antoni is a system coach. He's got a system that worked really well in Phoenix. He's got a system that didn't work terribly well in New York. But he's not known as a manager of big egos, a guy who can stroke this guy and then whip this other guy into shape. That's not his MO. He certainly was, a great fit, obviously, if you're looking at just the relationship with Steve Nash. But as we all know, Los Angeles is a different animal. And if you're going to have a coach coming there, he's got to be able to manage that whole Laker kingdom and how the dynamics out there work. And I didn't think he showed me from his time in New York that he was going to be particularly adept at dealing with it in Los Angeles.
Well, that's a good point. I'll ask you that, Fran. I was thinking D'Antoni didn't have a great run in New York. He's obviously struggling here in L.A. Is that part of it? The fact that big cities, big franchises, and he's just maybe he's not a guy for those kind of places.
Oh, I don't think it has to do with his worldliness. I mean, this is a guy who played in Italy under his playing career. Mike D'Antoni's not having stage fright. I think it's a little bit of both that Scott and Sekou were talking about. I mean, I think that, look, I think a lot of us think they needed to hire Phil Jackson back. They had the ultimate manager of the egos and the role players. They also had they've got a roster that is more conducive to play the triangle offense that Jackson ran, as opposed to trying to get up tempo with it. But having said that, I go back to what Scott said. Look, these guys are going into fourth quarters having at home, and then completely falling apart against teams like Orlando and Indiana. And Indiana came in as a playoff team, but they haven't played up to their expectations either. So the players have to bear some of the burden for this. But I mean, ultimately, I think if they wanted just to get through this season to match what they have in terms of talent with what they could maximize that talent, it was Phil Jackson.
Well, let me go back to what Scott was saying too, and I'll go to you, Jeff. It is a player problem now, as Fran points out, and but isn't it a focus thing? And isn't that focus thing on the coach, Jeff?
Well, I mean, to an extent, I mean, sure, you have great motivators, but these guys are professionals, and you look at their defense. Their defense is horrible. Guys don't know when to switch. I mean, there's complete disarray. They're leaving guys wide open for shots. The other day, Chris Duhon, I forget the play, rolled right off a guy late, and was it Verjao he left wide open for a jumper at the free throw line? I mean, just rolled right off him and left him wide open. So there's big time issues on defense, and then the whole D'Antoni, Phil Jackson thing, yes, I think Phil Jackson would have been the choice. Magic Johnson has made that pretty clear. He thinks that. And look at Kobe Bryant talking about his zen and talking about how he used to have a coach that kept things calm and in perspective, and that's what he's trying to do now. So even he's channeling Phil Jackson at the moment. And you do have to be concerned, I think, with D'Antoni's comments here of late. He seems to be getting extremely defensive. We're very short into his tenure, but he's getting very defensive and said something to the effect of, how could this end badly for me? Hey, I'll just go play golf the rest of my life. Here in Dallas, a certain quarterback said after a big loss to Philadelphia, hey, if this is the worst thing that happens to me, I've led a pretty good life, and he was fried for it. So I think that's a bit disconcerting. To me, it's also interesting that when Bernie Bickerstaff took over, the team played pretty loose. Looked like they were having fun. It looked like the shackles were off. They didn't play great competition necessarily, but they did take San Antonio down to the wire and seemed to have a spirit to them. So I think it's pretty interesting that in that interim period, they sort of look like a team coming together, and then D'Antoni comes in, and all of a sudden things are falling apart, and they seem to be worse than they were before.
All good points. John, you wrote today on the Hang Time blog about there's not much time to be messing around anymore. If you're going to make a change, you better start doing it now. How much time do they have?
Not much. I mean, I look at it this way: they're in a hole, a pretty big hole right now. After that New York game, they're 9-14. I think Nash will obviously make them a better offensive team, but as I've said before, I don't think they have the the personnel to maximize a Nash D'Antoni offense, meaning they don't have the 3-point shooting that they need. So I think they could be like a top 5 offensive team, maybe 3 or 4, but I don't think they're as good as Oklahoma City, New York, those teams offensively. And then, as Jeff mentioned, the defense has been terrible, and at best, maybe they're looking like a mediocre defensive team. And I look at it like this way: it's like you have a top 5 offense and a mediocre defense. You're maybe over 82 games, a 50-win team. If you take that pace over their final, 59 games or so, they're going to win maybe a total of 45, 46 games, and I don't think that makes the playoffs in the Western Conference. So I think there has to be some sort of change, some sort of whether it's a roster change or something has to happen where they can become a top 10 defensive team, or a roster change where they can get some shooting in there, where they can be a real a serious Nash D'Antoni offense. For them to be anything better than like a 6-7 seed in the West, and if they're at the bottom of the West, those 4 teams at the top are so good that I don't see them getting out of the first round the way they are at best. So
let me end this up by going back to Scott on that. Is this a team liable to make a move? Are they ready? Is their finger there on the panic button? Are they ready to move, or are they going to wait till Steve and Nash and Gasol are back? And is that going to be too late for them? Need to make a move.
Well, I don't think it'll be too late, because indications are that Pau and Steve Nash are both relatively close to coming back. It's not going to be tonight. It's not going to be tomorrow. But I don't think we're looking at weeks with the plural either. So I think they want to definitely wait it out and see what team they have. But at the same time, they're not going to sit on their hands and let the season go down the drain like this. They're going to be looking for trades. Mitch Kupchak will be an aggressive general manager, and he will be working the phones. They're not going to let this happen like this. At the same time, they don't have that many options. They just don't have that many moves to make. When you look at, they're obviously not going to trade Kobe. They're not going to trade Nash. They're not going to trade Dwight Howard. You're not going to get anything for Meta World Peace. And at that point, everybody's back to jumping up and down on Pau Gasol's head. Well, is this his fault? No, of course not, because Pau's been out now. As much as he took heat early on from fans, as always, and from the media, as always, and then even from Mike D'Antoni, who stepped into the who stepped into his new job and immediately took a hammer to Pau and sort of dinged him for being out of shape. Pau is out now, and the Lakers are as bad as ever. So this obviously can't be on Pau. The trick there is everybody says, well, you trade him and you get something. Who are you going to get that's better? There just aren't that many options out there. You're going to have to take either a huge salary back or a terrible contract back, and I don't think they're going to do that. You're going to need either a power forward or a small forward because you're set at every other position. You're certainly not going to be taking picks and prospects if you're the Lakers at this point. So when you factor in position, experience, and salary, and saying we need somebody better than Pau Gasol, there just aren't that many options out there right now.
It's a funny thing, and this has been mentioned several places, is as much grief as Pau took early on when they were playing bad, they're definitely worse without him in there. The numbers show that, don't they, John?
Oh, yeah. I mean, their defense has been terrible the last 6 or 7 games where it's basically at a level that would rank bottom in the league. And it's obvious, from a numbers standpoint and just from an eye test standpoint that their defense is awful. I mean, the breakdowns are just really, really bad. We saw some in Cleveland. We saw some against the Knicks. We saw some against Orlando. There's just fingers pointing all over the place after every bat. Almost seems like after every other basket the opponent scores, somebody's pointing their finger at somebody else, and it's bad news. And I talked to somebody, and they think that Nash brings that offense and just brings a sort of a good feeling, just a chemistry thing back to the team, and the defense will just improve that way. But I'll see that I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah. As badly as the Lakers have been playing, and as surprised perhaps as many people are as how the Lakers have been playing, the Knicks have been the other way around, I think. I mean, I think a lot of people thought they might be good. I'm not sure many people thought they'd be this good. How come they're this good, John?
3-point shooting, mostly. I mean,
Can they keep that up?
No, not entirely. I think they could still be, one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the league, maybe even one of the better top 10 3-point shooting team in NBA history, perhaps. The other thing is turnovers, and that's the one that's even more interesting. The Sixers last year set a record for the fewest turnovers, and the Knicks are even lower than that this year, which is interesting. And I've talked about this in the past, where that was sort of where they regressed offensively last year, where their turnover rate really went up. And that was an issue of not having a point guard to start the season, then having Jeremy Lin, who was turnover prone, and having Baron Davis, who was even worse from a turnover issue than Jeremy Lin, and then having no point guard again, really, basically. So, and that's been huge. And it's lack of turnovers, it's 3-point shooting. Their defense has taken a step back, but it hasn't needed to be very good. And obviously, Carmelo Anthony is just playing off the charts, and Jason Kidd shooting 50% from 3 is kind of ridiculous. So you give them a ton of credit. They're playing great. I'm a little doubtful of how well they can sustain this kind of offense. And of course, I'm very curious as to what's going to happen when Amari Stoudemire comes back.
Jeff, you've seen Jason Kidd plenty in your career. Does he make that much of a difference?
I think he's made a huge difference there, and really, I didn't think he made any sense for the Mavericks with what they were doing with the team, even though Mark Cuban wanted him back for 3 more years. In fact, in conversations with Kidd during the summer, I was like, why would you want to come back here? Once Darren Williams made up his mind not to come to Dallas, I was like, what is left here? Go to New York, and you can be the guy to sort of bring harmony to that dysfunction. You've got Tyson, you've got Carmelo Anthony, you've got pieces in place there in an Eastern Conference that isn't going to be very good. You can go up there and make a big difference, and I think he really has. Did I see 52% three-point shooting? No, but he's been a good three-point shooter in Dallas. He struggled the last couple of years, but when he's had his health and is feeling good, he can make a big difference. And the biggest difference is sort of just the respect level that these guys have for him, in the sense that I think he can be a real calming influence and get into the head of Carmelo and J.R. Smith. And then when you combine that with Tyson, who, if everyone remember in 2011, Dirk Nowitzki, he called Tyson the MVP. early on, from a month into the season on. Tyson was the MVP of that team. So, yeah, I think Kidd's made a huge addition, and I think his sacrifice of playing with Raymond Felton and letting Felton sort of be the real ball handler of that team and be more the spot-up shooter, three-point guy, which is obviously his strengths now, I think it's been huge for them.
All right, Fran. I asked a blog table question on the Hang Time blog this past week about whether the Hawks were an Eastern Conference contender. None of you guys bought. None of you thought they were in the finals. So, are we destined for a Knicks Heat Eastern Conference Finals? You think?
Well, at this point, it certainly looks that way. But what we saw out of Boston, a couple of years ago, picking themselves up off the floor, if they stay healthy. And just their feistiness, with Garnett and Rondo still there, even though Ray Allen's gone, and Paul Pierce. They're the Eastern Conference version of San Antonio. We pull the shovels out of the garage every year to bury them, and they dig their way out. So I'm not. Maybe I'll be fooled this way in the other direction, but I'm not burying the Celtics yet.
You put them 1, 2, 3 with the Knicks then, and the Heat.
Maybe not. I put them in right now at a clear number 3. But I still, if you wanted to come down to, you wanted to pick either the Celtics or the Hawks, I'm still going with Boston.
What about you, Sekou?
I'm not sure, JD. In my complaint, I go back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, when you talk about fits and role players and which guys are good for a team. I don't even understand how we could table a conversation like this without recognizing the fact that there are just certain guys who fit together and other guys who don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you talk about Jason Kidd, aside from his early years in Dallas when there was a whole other batch of drama going on, he was a great teammate. He's always had a positive impact on his team. He took 2 teams to the NBA Finals, two Nets teams that got smoked in the finals, but they wouldn't have sniffed the finals without Jason Kidd. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That 03 series was tied 2-2.
Yeah, wake me up when they get to Game 7. So to me, all of this conversation, we talk about a team like the Lakers, and I know I'm backtracking a little bit, but in the Knicks, it's about fits and chemistry and personnel. Like watching Jason Kidd on that bench last night in the Inside Tracks on TNT when he's kind of playing cheerleader and assistant coach and advisor, to Carmelo and a bunch of other guys. That's how you win big in the NBA, is when you have the kind of cohesion on a roster that lends itself to every guy sacrificing for the greater good. I know it sounds hokey, but Jeff watched it a couple years ago in Dallas. I was there for every playoff game they had, from the first one till the last one. You just get a cosmic ride going with a team. Fran's seen it. You have to have a certain kind of indescribable quality to a team where they just understand each other. They get each other. And that requires not just the stars to be aligned like your big stars, but it requires some other dudes to be in that same space. And I think that's what you're seeing right now in New York and a lot of other places where the teams are playing well early in the season.
And not what you're seeing in LA. So how do you get that if you don't have it, Scott?
Well, either you have it or you don't. Obviously this gets back to your roster decisions, and I think that's why I was saying that it's up to the players in LA to do it, and just as it's been up to the players in New York to do it, because the impact of Jason Kidd, as everybody has stated, cannot be measured. It's one of those special intangible things, just as when Carmelo plays like this, as opposed to the bad Carmelo that has seeped in sometimes in past years, that can bring a team down. And when we talk about the chemistry, I think it was John Schumann that alluded to this. It'll be interesting to see what happens when Amari comes back as well. You have it based on the players on your team and the culture that comes down through the operation from the head coach and down through the leadership that you have. It's an intangible thing. It's like Sekou said. It's one of those things that's a real tough to put your finger on, and it doesn't have to be harmony, because as the Lakers proved for several years, you could be lifting a championship trophy with one hand and with your other hand have it on your teammate's throat, trying to strangle the life out of him. So it doesn't have to be that there's sunshine and unicorns all the time, but there does have to be something special going on. The Celtics had it. That's why I don't think that Boston should be counted out. I agree with Fran that I wouldn't knock them out of the picture yet, and I also think probably along in that conversation, the Nets shouldn't be overlooked either.
Sunshine and unicorns. What about that, folks? That brings us to you, John. I wanted to talk real quick, and I want to speed this thing up a little bit if I could, and jump us a topic here. Let's talk All-Star a little bit for a second. We had the first All-Star voting ballots come out the other day. Anything in there strike you one way or the other?
I can't say that it. Oh, I can't. For me, I can't say that it did. Really, I mean, I like Chris Paul and Kobe. I mean, there's nothing that really struck me as a major thing. I think it's just so early to really say that this guy is an all-star, this guy is not. It's 20 games. Yeah, I don't know what Fran had to say about that.
Well, I mean, look, let's face it. Yeah, I think John's absolutely right. It's early to say who's all-stars, but look, the all-star game is never about who are the all-stars, who are the deserving people of the first quarter, the first half. It's who the fans want to see. That's what fan balloting is all about, and that's what's reflected in the early balloting. I mean, look, for crying out loud, you got two Lakers starting. Spent a half an hour just talking about how bad they are, and Kobe and Dwight are there starting. You know, that's just ridiculous. I mean, the interesting things I thought, other than that came out of it, is that, you know, the Tim Duncan rule was supposedly put into effect to you know, with Duncan's position not being defined, and this was going to help him get back in there. Well, he's over 200,000 votes behind Dwight Howard, so it hasn't helped with Tim Duncan. And I was also interested to see the early returns on Jeremy Lin. And as what you see is, you know, the effect, the Yao Ming effect coming from Asia is still very strong, and you know, he's there in third place. I mean, I don't think he's gonna jump into a starting spot, but it's interesting that he's sitting in third place in the Western Conference.
Jeff Kaplan, even though we all know the All-Star Game's a fans' game and all that stuff, but doesn't it hack you off a little bit when somebody's deserving is not going to get a sniff of that thing?
Well, the one that's ridiculous to me is Zach Randolph is in 8th place. You know, Dirk Nowitzki, who hasn't played a game yet this season, has 63,000 votes, and Zach Randolph has 59,000. Barely more than Meta World Peace, and Randolph is having just an absolute career season. I mean, just a beast. And then, you know, mentioning with Jeremy Lin being third, and hey, he could pick off CP3, which would be ridiculous. You know, Lin's ahead of Harden and Westbrook, and Nash, who's played 6 quarters, is 6th. So, you know, hey, it's fan voting. That's the way it goes. And then, you know, the coaches will have to. And I'll tell you the other one, too, is Andrew Bynum and Amari Stoudemire in the East have more votes than Anderson Varejao and Brooke Lopez, for that matter. So, you know, people either aren't paying attention or they just go with the names they know. But on some level, you know, it's frustrating, obviously. But, you know, hey, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Scott, what do you think about the All-Star Game? I wonder sometimes whether players really care.
They only care when they get overlooked, and then it's the world is against me, and I'll show you, and all this, and all this other stuff, and then suddenly they have people in their ear about what person in the media said this against you, and what opposing player said that. So they'll find a way to turn this into some slight that will forever be avenged. But bottom line is, if fans have no place to complain. If they don't like the way the balloting is going, pick up a smartphone, go to a ballot box somewhere. Just go ahead and start clicking on your guy. It's not that big a deal. You know, I think that people see this as the reason to get frustrated, and really this is fans who should be getting on fans. This isn't about publicity that people get or anything like that. We hear all the time about the great Warriors fans, and I believe as much as anybody that that's true. And then when the first set of results come out, Steph Curry and David Lee are pretty far down the list, even though both should be in the conversation. We'll do something about it. Go ahead and click.
Are we allowed to vote in Courtney Kirkland for the All-Star game, by the way? I'm just asking.
Did he foul him on that? I thought he got him on the head.
I think so.
Yeah, they said that's brutal. The refs out of hand, Sekou?
Yeah, well, that's another conversation altogether. I do think we need to be careful. Scott's inciting fans to get on other fans. That could turn out bad.
Yeah. Who knows? There may be some ugliness out there in chat rooms one day.
They might get into a cyber fist fight, but
yeah, you'd hate for people to leave bad comments on the comment section.
Exactly.
We don't want to start that now, do we?
No.
If we came out, if we could talk about all the injustices and we're guarding the gates, we're the Puritans and all that, and if they trotted out an all-star game that had Zach Randolph and Greg Monroe and Anderson Varejao, I mean, come on, TNT, people be clicking all over. Nobody wants to see. The fans want to see the stars. If you want justice done here and recognize it, that's when the coaches come in.
Exactly.
They can do it right and say, wait a minute, Anderson Varejao is playing his tail off. Get him on the team. Greg Popovich was upset last year when Tim Duncan was left off the team. Well, he needed to get on and give a little nasty to his fellow coaches in the Western Conference.
I will point out that the coaches don't always get it right either, though.
Right.
They screw it up all the time, but at least you have a chance for a cleanup after the fans get done voting. And Varejao is a prime example of a guy who's putting up these really pretty numbers that mean absolutely nothing to me. I mean, and I'm not knocking the guy. I know he's working hard and playing hard, but all these double-digit rebounding efforts that he's getting, name me another decent rebounder on his team. I mean, if he doesn't get them, nobody will on the Cavaliers roster. It's not like averaging 10 rebounds or 12 rebounds like Zach Randolph does on a team where Marc Gasol plays alongside him.
Right.
So, I mean, I kind of take Varejao's rebounding numbers with a grain of salt. My only complaint about the All-Star balloting is I forget who mentioned earlier. I heard all this stuff about position specific is no longer a part of the deal and you don't have to worry about it. And then when you see the returns, they have the centers listed by position. It's like they should have just listed everybody. Just list them all, who got what votes, regardless of position, and then we'll go from there. Because I've never been a fan of these position-specific, the voting. Just like Frank said, the fans want to see certain guys. They're going to vote for them no matter what. They don't care if there's an F, a C, or a G in front of their name, and they're going to vote for him year after year. Jeremy Lin's a prime example. He's going to get a bunch of votes, no matter how well he's playing or not playing at the time, for reasons that go above and beyond simply the game of basketball. And that's not going to change as long as there's a fan vote to the process.
Sounds good. Guys, we're going to wrap it up with one quick one. I'm going to throw a different one at you. Fran, give me something that you're looking – we got, some time here before Christmas. What are you looking at in the NBA? What interests you between now and Christmas?
Well, obviously, we're all looking at can the Lakers pull it together. I'll tell you one that I still want to see. I want to see Jeremy Lin able to do. I'm not expecting Linsanity, and I'm not expecting his 38-point game that he had last week. I want to see him be able to work a little bit more, not a little bit more, just any trace at all of being able to work with James Harden. What we've seen, these two guys can put up big numbers independently of one another.
Right.
But I want to see him be able to play off of Harden. Kevin McHale said the other night that, we got guys, Lin can go down the left and finish with his right, and Harden can go down the right and finish with his left. Okay, well, now we're 20-some games into it. I think we ought to see it. So that's one of the things that here in Houston that I'm looking to see.
I heard or read someplace, and maybe it was you that wrote it, Fran, about the possibility of Lin coming off the bench. You think that'll happen?
No, I don't think so. No, I think he's the guy. They didn't bring him in here to be a guy coming off the bench, and they
didn't bring him in there to be Harden in Oklahoma City.
No, they didn't bring him in here to be Harden. But I think they want them to. They need to find a way for these two guys to work together.
Yeah. Jeff Kaplan, what are you looking for in the NBA between now and Christmas?
Well, James Harden's a good segue. I'm keeping an eye on the Thunder. And in fact, on Christmas Day, they'll be at Miami for a big game. But watched them play a couple times this year already against Houston in Harden's return, and then also the other night in that beatdown of the Lakers that got close late. And like everybody else, I think that when the Harden trade went down, I was kind of like, what? I mean, come on. But the more I look at it, that was more of a sentimental feeling, I think, of this young homegrown team being broken up before they had a chance to win it all. But when you look at them now, I mean, man, this is a complete team, and that's something I used to knock them on, was I did not think they were a complete team. I didn't think they were very deep. I didn't think they were able to score with a post presence, and that's still a bit of an issue for them. But I think they've got two players that are unguardable in Westbrook and Durant. I think Kevin Martin has just been an unbelievable fit for them. He's not just a shooter. This guy can drive. He can handle the ball. He gets to the free throw line like crazy. Ibaka is playing his best, having a career year, scoring the basketball. He's still a great blocker. I just think they're a very, very good team, and I really like the way Scott Brooks continues to handle that team, even though he's been criticized for his X's and O's. But I'm very interested to see how they continue to evolve and how dominant they can be on both ends of the ball. I don't think they get enough credit defensively as well. So just really looking forward to watching those guys continue to grow.
Two things I'm going to write down here on the first vlog table we do is Sunshine and Unicorns. That's from Scott Howard Cooper, and Scoring the Basketball from Jeff Kaplan. I always like that one. Scoring the Basketball.
Did I say that? Scoring the Basketball.
John Schumann, what are you looking forward to between now and Christmas?
Probably some defensive consistency from the Heat. They have that matchup with the Thunder on Christmas, and the Thunder, they have the best offense in the league. So I'm curious to see if the Heat can turn it up a little bit defensively between now and then. They don't have any real tough opponents between now and Christmas. So, obviously the defensive end of the floor has been their big problem. And even though their record is fine, it's obviously shown up as a problem in those games against the Knicks and a couple other games. So I want to see the Heat sort of get back to being a top 5 defensive team, and really prove it on Christmas when they face the Thunder, and stop and slow down that offense that's been just tearing through the league right now. But it's got to start obviously in those games leading up, as far as just showing that they can win with defense, and showing that they can stop some sort of mediocre opponents and hold them to under 90 points each night out.
That's interesting. We're many minutes into this first vlog table, and the first time the Heat came up, they're kind of under the radar there with the Lakers' problems and the Knicks doing everything, and the defending champs. Hardly anybody's paying a whole lot of attention to them. That's interesting. Scott, between now and Christmas Day, what do you got?
Well, number one, I'd like to see a reference to Puritan.
Oh, that makes the list too. Fran Blyberry, check in. That's right.
Number two, the Lakers. The great thing about the Lakers is whether they're doing very well or very bad, there is that lightning rod about them, that there's something captivating that half the world is celebrating and half the world is stocking up on canned goods and water and heading down to the bunker, whether things are going good or bad. So I think that's a pretty fascinating read, whichever way it goes. Number three, and speaking of surprisingly off the radar, as you mentioned, the Heat, we should be talking a lot more about Anthony Davis, and I think we will be in the next couple of weeks now as he starts to build his momentum back up. He's back from the injury. I think that we have a race now for Rookie of the Year. As much as Damian Lillard is clearly the man in control of this race, I think people forget how good Anthony Davis is. And it's especially surprising because he's the number one pick, and you don't normally overlook guys like that. But it was the case last year at Kentucky, because they obviously had a lot of other NBA talent on that team. But he was so well known for his defense that I don't think people really realized how good he was offensively. So he comes here, and he was not in Summer League. He was with USA Basketball, but he didn't play a lot, so you didn't see him there either. Then he starts his season, puts up some good numbers early, then gets hurt. So he's a little bit out of sight, out of mind as well. Well, now he's back, and if his health holds, I think people are going to be reminded that this is a very special player that has not gotten the attention that he deserves. Obviously terrific talent defensively, but I think offensively very underrated. He knows what to do with the ball. He's not a one-dimensional player. I think that's what I'm really interested in seeing in the next couple of weeks is Anthony Davis building back up to his form.
Great. Sekou, we're going to end with you. You got to give us a memorable line, Puritan, unicorns, ball, whatever you got. But we got some time between now and Christmas. What's going to strike you? What are you going to be tuning into?
Well, I'm going to bow out of the memorable lines.
Come on!
For this first one. I think Puritan takes the cake, but I'm curious to see.
We'll put a poll up.
I'm curious to see if the Celtics are going to turn their season into what I think we all thought it would be. Last year, with the way they finished in the playoffs, both San Antonio and Boston, if you'd have told me that, 22, 23 games into this season, the Spurs would be struggling to figure out how to get themselves together, not the Celtics, that would have made more sense based on how they finished. The Spurs look great, and, we never talk about them. We ignore them all the time, according to the Spurs fans, which they're used to by now after all these years. But I expected a lot more of the Celtics. I thought Jeff Green would play better. I thought Jason Terry would give them, a different and better spark than he's given them. Courtney Lee hasn't quite, been the player I thought he'd be for them. And then you got Rajon Rondo, who's, been a spark plug and a fire plug and all this other stuff. But he's also been kind of a lightning rod for the Celtics in a lot of ways with some of the stuff he's done this year, the infamous cat fight with Chris Humphrey. So I want to see if they're going to find a way to get themselves together in time for Christmas, which to me over the years, Christmas has been kind of that's the first bell I ring in an NBA season. By Christmas, I expect to see a team playing like what I thought they were going to be, or maybe setting themselves up to become the team everybody expects them to be for the rest of the season. I know that the All-Star break is a lot of people's halfway point, but I think that's too late even. You really got to crank it up to me before then. You got to show by Christmas, when the marquee teams usually are on center stage against one another, that you're ready for, the kind of season you maybe have scripted for yourself. So we'll see how Doc Rivers kind of gets them together, but if I had to, like I said, if I had to pick going into the season which aging team I thought would struggle this year, I would have told you the Spurs and not the Celtics based on how they finished, and that's turned out to be the complete opposite.
That's Boston at Brooklyn on New Year's, or in Christmas, is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
That is right. Okay, well, that'll be an interesting one to look for then. Guys, thanks for taking time out of your busy day. That's a wrap for the vlog table, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.